Tirzah woke on her 18th birthday, a spark of excitement flickering in her chest. Today marked a milestone, a leap into adulthood, and she couldn't wait to soak in the moment. She stretched beneath her faded quilt, the morning light filtering through her bedroom's thin curtains, painting soft gold streaks across the walls. A peculiar scent hung in the air, sweet, like vanilla, and something earthier, almost like rain-soaked wood. It felt special, different, as if the universe itself was whispering that this day would matter. She envisioned a modest family dinner, her parents' familiar faces lit by candlelight, maybe a homemade cake if her mother was in a generous mood. Gifts were a long shot. Her family wasn't big on extravagance, but she let herself hope for a small token, maybe a book or a scarf. Humming softly, she slipped into her favorite sweater, the one with the frayed cuffs, and padded downstairs. The house was quiet, too quiet, the usual clatter of her mother in the kitchen absent. Her parents, Sean and Jessica, were already in the living room, their postures rigid on the sagging couch. Tirzah's excitement dimmed, a faint unease curling in her stomach. She brushed it off, chalking it up to her imagination, and busied herself with small chores, waiting for the day to unfold. By afternoon, the unease had grown, gnawing at her like a persistent itch. Sean called her into the living room, his voice sharp, cutting through the stillness. "Tirzah, come here." She froze mid-step, her sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. His tone was the one he used when she'd messed up, spilled milk as a kid, forgotten a chore, or dared to talk back. She walked in, her heart thudding, and found her parents sitting like statues. Sean leaned forward, elbows on his knees, avoiding her gaze. Jessica sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes fixed on the worn rug. "Sit down," Sean said, his voice low and cold, carrying that same edge she'd learned to dread. Tirzah lowered herself onto the edge of the armchair, her fingers gripping the armrests. She'd mastered the art of staying composed around them. Showing emotion was like waving a red flag. Tears or anger only made things worse, so she kept her face neutral, her breathing steady, even as her gut screamed that something was terribly wrong. Jessica cleared her throat, her voice flat, devoid of warmth. "You were adopted." The words landed like a slap, sharp and sudden. Tirzah's breath caught, but Jessica didn't pause. "I took you in when you were 2. Your birth mother, she abandoned you, left you like you were nothing. I did what I could, raised you as my own." Tirzah's mind reeled, the room tilting slightly. Adopted. The word echoed, foreign and heavy. She tried to grasp it, to piece together the implications, but it was like clutching at smoke. Her whole life, her memories, her place in this house, felt like it was unraveling. She wanted to ask questions, to demand details, but her tongue felt glued to the roof of her mouth. She sat there, frozen, her wide eyes flicking between her parents, searching for something, regret, softness, anything. There was nothing. Sean shifted, finally meeting her gaze, his eyes hard. "We've done our part, Tirzah. You're 18 now. It's time you find your own way." Jessica nodded, her voice clipped. "You're an adult. We can't keep carrying you. You need to figure out what's next." The words sliced through her, each one a precise cut. They were kicking her out. On her birthday. The day she'd woken up dreaming of celebration was now a day of exile. She waited for tears to come, for anger to surge, but nothing did. Her body felt hollow, her emotions locked behind a wall she'd built over years of swallowing disappointment. Growing up, she'd learned to accept whatever her parents threw at her. Criticism, silence, impossible expectations, without protest. Objection only brought harsher words, colder shoulders. This, she realized, was just another thing to endure. She nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." It was all she could manage. She stood, her legs unsteady, and walked back to her room, the weight of their words trailing her like a shadow. The sweet scent from the morning was gone, replaced by the stale air of a house that no longer felt like home. Tirzah stood in the living room, her gaze sweeping across the familiar space, as if her eyes were trying to etch every detail into her memory. The faded floral wallpaper, the creaky floorboard by the coffee table, the faint stain on the couch from a juice spill when she was 8. It all felt sacred now, fleeting. She waited, half expecting her parents to soften, to say something, anything, to bridge the chasm opening between them. But Sean kept his eyes on the floor, his jaw tight, and Jessica's gaze remained fixed on her lap, her fingers twisting the hem of her cardigan. The silence was suffocating, a confirmation that nothing would change. Tirzah rose slowly, her movements deliberate like she was navigating a dream. She nodded, more to herself than to them, and cleared her throat. "Can I go pack my stuff?" Her voice was soft, cautious, testing the air. Jessica glanced up briefly, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she said. The word clipped. Final. Tirzah turned and climbed the stairs to her room, her footsteps heavy on the worn steps. The mechanical act of packing steadied her. She didn't have much to claim. Her life had always been sparse, uncluttered by excess. Kneeling by her bed, she pulled out a battered backpack and began folding her favorite clothes. A soft blue sweater with a tiny hole at the elbow, a few well-worn t-shirts, a pair of jeans that fit just right. She tucked in a small toiletry bag with her toothbrush, a half-used tube of toothpaste, and a bar of soap. Her fingers brushed against a dog-eared paperback on her nightstand, a thrift store copy of The Secret Garden, and she slipped it into the bag, its familiar weight a quiet comfort. Her eyes drifted to the windowsill, where a handful of photographs leaned against the glass. One showed her at 10, gap-toothed and grinning at a county fair, clutching a melting ice cream cone. Another was of her and Jessica in the kitchen, flour dusting their aprons from a rare day of baking cookies. The last was a faded Polaroid of the three of them, Sean, Jessica and Tirzah, on a camping trip, the only time she remembered her father laughing. She hesitated, her chest tightening, then tucked the photos into a side pocket. They were proof of a life she'd lived, even if it was slipping away. 30 minutes later, she was done. The backpack sat plump but not heavy, a testament to how little she owned. She slung it over one shoulder and descended the stairs, the house creaking around her like it too was saying goodbye. At the front door, she paused, stealing one last glance at the living room. Sean was still inside, his back to her, unmoving. Jessica, though, stood on the porch, her silhouette framed by the late afternoon sun. Tirzah stepped outside, the cool air brushing her face. She met Jessica's eyes searching for something, regret, warmth, an explanation. Jessica's hands hung stiffly at her sides, her face a mask of neutrality. The truth settled into Tirzah like a stone. They were letting her go because she'd never truly been theirs. Not in their hearts. The realization stung, sharp and raw, because this house, this porch, these walls, they were her home. She'd memorized the squeak of the screen door, the way the light slanted through the kitchen window at dawn. Now it was unraveling, the sense of belonging dissolving with every breath. She thought of the years under this roof, the quiet dinners, the rare moments of laughter. Jessica had taken her in, fed her, clothed her, when her birth mother had walked away. That act, however cold it felt now, had shaped her life. Tirzah's throat tightened, but she forced a small, unsteady smile. "Thank you for everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, carrying a sincerity she hadn't expected. Tirzah slid into the driver's seat of her beat-up Honda Accord, the familiar creak of the door a small anchor in the storm of her thoughts. That morning she'd been thrilled when Sean told her he'd replaced the battery, his rare gesture of care sparking a warmth she hadn't felt in months. Now the truth soured the memory. He hadn't done it for her. He'd done it to make sure she could leave. The realization twisted in her chest as she tossed her backpack onto the passenger seat, the zipper clinking against the worn upholstery. She turned the key, and the engine sputtered to life, reliable despite the car's dents and faded paint. This car was hers. bought with every cent of the $3,000 she'd scraped together last summer, flipping burgers and scrubbing counters at the fast food joint downtown. Sean had insisted she shouldn't buy a car alone, warning her about scammers who'd prey on a naive teenager. He'd found the Honda himself, handed her the keys and called it the best deal for her money. She'd believed him, grateful for his guidance. Months later, a co-worker had let slip that a car like hers was worth half that price. The betrayal had stung, but she'd swallowed it like always. Now it was just another lie in a long line of them. Tirzah backed out of the gravel driveway, the tires crunching softly, and eased onto the paved road. At the end of the street, the road spilled onto a busier highway, but that afternoon, it was eerily quiet, the usual hum of traffic replaced by a stillness that mirrored her own. She drove, the steering wheel warm under her palms, with no destination in mind. The world stretched out ahead, vast and uncharted, and for a moment she felt a strange freedom. A smile tugged at her lips, then a laugh bubbled up, sharp and bitter, at the absurdity of her fate. 18, homeless, and cast out on her birthday. It was almost poetic, but the laughter faded, and a hollowness crept in, heavy and cold. She was alone, truly alone. The weight of it pressed against her ribs, urging her to reach out, to call someone, anyone, who could tether her to the world. Her fingers hovered over her phone, but the names in her contacts, high school friends, co-workers, felt like traps. She imagined their pitying looks, the whispers that would follow. Tirzah got kicked out. Can you believe it? The thought of their mockery, or worse, their awkward sympathy, made her stomach churn. She couldn't bear it. What she needed wasn't a place to sleep. She had her car, its cramped back seat a makeshift bed. She didn't need money or food, not yet. The $50 in her wallet and the granola bars in her bag would hold her over. What she craved was a voice, a connection, someone to say, "You're not alone. You'll be okay." Someone to offer words of encouragement, to promise that the world wasn't as cruel as it felt in this moment. Her eyes stung, but she blinked the tears away, focusing on the road. As the miles stretched on, the distance from her former home grew, and so did the ache of her solitude. Her thoughts drifted to her biological mother, a faceless figure she'd never considered until today. In the blur of Jessica's revelation, Tirzah hadn't thought to ask where her birth mother was, or if she was even alive. The oversight gnawed at her now. What would she say if she found her? "Hi, I'm the kid you abandoned. My adoptive parents kicked me out, so here I am." The idea was laughable, pathetic. Even if her mother was out there, would she care? Would anyone? Tirzah gripped the wheel tighter, the highway blurring through the sheen of unshed tears. "You're okay," she whispered to herself, testing the words. They felt hollow, but she said them again, louder, as if repetition could make them true. The road stretched on, and she drove, chasing a horizon that offered no answers. A spark of memory jolted Tirzah, cutting through the fog of her loneliness. Grandma Amy. Her heart skipped, a flicker of hope igniting. How could she have forgotten? But the warmth was fleeting, chased by a sharp pang in her chest. She recalled the icy words Jessica had hurled at Amy during their last visit, the tension thick enough to choke on. Tirzah had never fully understood the rift between mother and daughter, something about old grudges, unspoken betrayals, but it ran deep. Jessica's coldness toward Amy had spilled over onto Tirzah too. She'd always liked Grandma Amy, with her warm laugh and twinkling eyes, but Jessica's disapproval had kept her at arm's length. Open affection felt risky, like betraying the fragile balance of her adoptive home. Now, though, a rebellious thought stirred. What could Jessica say now? Nothing. Tirzah was free to reach out, to love who she wanted, to seek the comfort she craved. The realization lifted a weight from her heart, light as a summer breeze. A smile broke across her face, tentative but real. She flicked on her blinker and eased the Honda onto the shoulder of the quiet highway, gravel crunching under the tires. Fishing her phone from her backpack, she scrolled to Amy's number, her thumb hovering for a moment before she pressed call. The line rang twice before Amy's familiar voice crackled through, bright and warm. "Tirzah! Happy birthday, my sweet girl." Tirzah laughed, a shaky sound, surprised and touched that Amy remembered. Joy dimmed as the weight of the day crashed back. She took a breath, steadying herself. "Grandma, I got kicked out. They told me I'm adopted, and then they just said I have to go." A heavy silence stretched on the other end, broken only by Amy's soft sigh. Tirzah's stomach twisted, fearing she'd burdened Amy with too much. But then Amy's voice came, steady and sure. "Well, happy birthday, sweetie. You know my address. Get yourself over here." Tirzah's eyes stung, a grin spreading despite the tears. "Okay," she whispered. "I'm coming." She hung up, started the car, and pulled back onto the highway, a new destination anchoring her. Amy's trailer was an hour away, in a small town tucked among rolling hills. The drive felt lighter now, the horizon less daunting. When Tirzah pulled into the gravel lot beside Amy's trailer, the sun was dipping low, casting a golden glow over the patchy lawn and the flower pots brimming with geraniums. Amy stood on the porch, her silver hair catching the light, her face lit with the biggest grin Tirzah had ever seen. She wore a faded denim dress and a knitted shawl, her arms already open. Tirzah barely shut off the engine before she was out of the car, crossing the yard in quick strides. They collided in a fierce hug, Amy's arms strong and warm, smelling of lavender and fresh-baked bread. "Oh, my girl," Amy murmured into Tirzah's hair, holding her tight. "You're here now. You're home." They stood there, swaying slightly, and Amy's voice softened, carrying the exact words Tirzah had been aching to hear. "You listen to me, Tirzah. You are never alone. Not ever. Even if it feels like the world's turned its back, there's God watching over you, guiding you, making sure you're okay. And you've got me. Always." Tirzah's throat tightened, tears spilling over, but they were different now. Relief, not despair. She nodded against Amy's shoulder, the weight of the day easing just a little. For the first time since that morning, she felt tethered, like she belonged somewhere, to someone. Amy pulled back, cupping Tirzah's face with calloused hands, her eyes fierce with love. "Now, come inside. I've got birthday cake waiting, and we've got some catching up to do." That evening, the small kitchen in Amy's trailer filled with the comforting aromas of their cooking. A hearty meal of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, and green beans sautéed with garlic. Tirzah chopped vegetables and seasoned the chicken, their movements syncing effortlessly, as if they'd cooked together for years. The clink of utensils and the sizzle of the pan wove a quiet rhythm, grounding Tirzah in the moment. They ate at the tiny formica table, the birthday cake, a lopsided chocolate creation with messy frosting, waiting on the counter for later. The food was warm, the company warmer, and for the first time that day, Tirzah felt like she could breathe. After dinner, they settled on the worn plaid couch in the living room, mugs of chamomile tea steaming in their hands. The trailer's walls were adorned with faded photos and crocheted doilies, a cozy contrast to the sterile house Tirzah had left behind. Their conversation meandered, memories of county fairs, Amy's stories of her old dog Rusty, Tirzah's dreams of maybe studying art someday. Then, Amy's tone shifted, her eyes growing serious. "You're old enough now, Tirzah, to hear the real story." Tirzah's breath caught, her eyes lighting up with a mix of curiosity and something deeper, an inexplicable nostalgia, as if her soul knew this moment would anchor her past to her future. She leaned forward, the mug warm against her palms as Amy began. "The reason you're sitting here with me," Amy said, her voice steady but laced with regret, "is the same reason Jessica and I have been at odds for years." She paused, her gaze drifting to a photo on the wall, a younger Jessica, smiling, before the hardness set in. When Jessica decided to adopt a baby, I was the first to ask why. That one question caught her off guard, and it didn't take long for the truth to come out. Tirzah tilted her head, her heart thudding. What truth? Amy sighed, her fingers tightening around her mug. Jessica was young, barely in her 20s, and obsessed with finding ways to make extra money. She'd always been creative about it, but this was different. She'd done her research and found out the government offered financial support for adoptive parents. That's why she wanted to adopt. Not out of love, not to build a family, but for the checks. When I realized she was serious, I tried to stop her. I told her it was wrong, that a child deserved better than being a means to an end. Tirzah's stomach twisted, the pieces of her life clicking into place. She stayed silent, letting Amy continue. Jessica didn't care that she was adopting for money, Amy said, her voice tinged with bitterness. She was furious I'd figured out her motive. She thought I'd report her to the authorities, and maybe I should have. But I didn't. Deep down, I hoped she'd change once she held you, that she'd fall in love with you and raise you as her own. I wanted to believe she was still the girl I raised, capable of that kind of love. Amy's eyes glistened, and she set her mug down, her hands trembling slightly. But today, the reason you're here, Tirzah, is because those checks stop when you turn 18. Your mission in their eyes was over. They didn't need you anymore, so they let you go. The words landed like stones, heavy but not surprising. Tirzah's throat tightened, but she didn't cry. She'd sensed the transactional nature of her place in that house, even if she'd never named it. Amy reached out, her hand resting on Tirzah's. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, for everything my daughter did to you. Protect you. Tirzah squeezed Amy's hand, managing a small smile. It's okay, Grandma. She paused, then added, her voice lighter. If you'd stopped her from adopting me, I wouldn't be here right now, would I? I wouldn't have you. Amy's face softened, and they both laughed, the sound breaking the tension like sunlight through clouds. Tirzah leaned back, the weight of Amy's story settling over her. It explained everything, the coldness, the distance, the abrupt end to her life with Jessica and Sean. Tirzah was just a year and a half old when Jessica adopted her, a wide-eyed toddler with a mop of dark curls and a quiet curiosity. Jessica was a reserved mother, her words sparse, her presence a still point in Tirzah's small universe. Tirzah would gaze at her for long, silent minutes, her young heart tethered to this woman who was her everything. To Tirzah, Jessica was a towering figure, the center of her world, someone to love fiercely and unquestioningly. Unbeknownst to Tirzah, Jessica carried a secret, a hidden truth locked away behind her guarded eyes, one she shared with no one, not even the child who adored her. In preschool, Tirzah noticed the other children's fathers swinging them into the air at pickup time, their laughter echoing across the playground. She'd tug at Jessica's hand, her voice small but earnest. Mama, how come my dad doesn't pick me up? Other kids have their dads sometimes. Jessica's face would tighten, her lips pressing into a thin line. Your father wasn't a good man, she'd say, her tone clipped. He left. That's all you need to know. Tirzah, too young to press further, would nod, but the questions lingered, buried under Jessica's deflections. Over time, Tirzah stopped asking, sensing the topic was a door slammed shut. When Tirzah was 7, Jessica met Sean, a man whose easy smile and gentle demeanor felt like a gift. He was kind to Tirzah, slipping her extra cookies when Jessica wasn't looking, helping her build lopsided sandcastles at the park. Jessica softened in his presence, her rare laughter filling their small apartment. After months of dating, Jessica decided to move in with him, and soon after, they married in a quiet courthouse ceremony. For Tirzah, those years were a golden blur, a fleeting season of sweetness she'd cradle in her memory. Jessica and Sean showered her with attention, new sneakers, a stuffed bear with a red bow, trips to the zoo where Sean hoisted her onto his shoulders to see the giraffes. They ate ice cream on summer evenings, the three of them sprawled on a picnic blanket, fireflies winking in the dusk. One evening, as they sat on the porch swing, Tirzah gathered her courage, her small hands twisting in her lap. "Sean," she said, her voice trembling with hope, "I always wanted a dad. And now you're here. Can I call you Dad?" Sean's eyes crinkled, his smile warm as he ruffled her hair. "Of course you can, kiddo," he said, pulling her into a hug. Tirzah beamed, the word Dad a treasure she'd longed to claim. For the first time, she felt like she belonged to a real family. But the warmth faded when Tirzah was 8, with the arrival of little Johnny, Sean and Jessica's biological son. The shift was immediate, like a light switching off. Johnny, with his chubby cheeks and bright eyes, became the sun around which the household orbited. Jessica's rare smiles were reserved for him, her hands always cradling his small form. Sean, once so attentive, turned distant, his warmth redirected to his son. Tirzah felt the change like a cold draft, invisible but undeniable. Worse, Sean's patience with her thinned, his voice sharpening when she spilled juice or forgot a chore. "Can't you be more careful?" he'd snap, his eyes hard as if she were an intruder in his home. What stung most was Jessica's silence. When Sean's temper flared, Tirzah looked to her mother for protection, for the fierce love she'd once believed in. But Jessica rarely intervened, often siding with Sean, her voice cool. "Listen to your father, Tirzah," she'd say, not meeting her daughter's eyes. Tirzah, still a child, couldn't fathom why her mother had grown so cold. She didn't know she was adopted, couldn't grasp that her place in the family was tethered to motives she'd never suspected. She only knew the ache of being sidelined. Her love for Jessica met with indifference. By the time Tirzah turned 10, she'd learned to navigate the new normal. She became a quiet girl, her spirit folded inward, her compliance a shield against conflict. She agreed to whatever her parents asked, cleaning the kitchen, watching Johnny, staying out of the way, because defiance only brought sharper words. She threw herself into school, earning good grades, and tackled chores with meticulous care, hoping obedience might earn back the love she'd lost. It became her rhythm, a way to survive in a home where she felt like a guest. Yet, even as she adapted, a small part of her held on to the memory of those early years with Sean, the brief time when she'd called him Dad and believed she was enough. Johnny grew up as Tirzah's opposite, a whirlwind of noise and confidence that filled every room. His laughter was loud, his demands bolder, and he moved through the world like he owned it, fearless and certain that everyone would adore him. At birthday parties or family gatherings, he was the sun, drawing every eye with his charm and expectant grin. If he wanted a new toy or a second slice of cake, he'd point, and it was his. No questions, no hesitation. Sean and Jessica indulged him, their faces lighting up at his every whim, as if his happiness was the pulse of the household. Tirzah, by contrast, faded into the background, often tasked with babysitting Johnny while their parents worked or ran errands. She wasn't just his sister, she was his keeper, more nanny than sibling. Johnny, spoiled and headstrong, chafed under her care. Tirzah set boundaries, no extra cookies before dinner, no running in the house, and Johnny's response was to wail, his tantrums echoing through the small house. Once, when Tirzah gently scolded him for throwing a toy, Sean stormed in, his face dark with anger. "What's going on here?" he barked, his eyes narrowing at Tirzah. She froze, her heart sinking. "If I ever see you talking to him like that again," he said, his voice low and threatening, "you'll regret it." Tirzah nodded, swallowing her defense, and Johnny smirked, knowing he'd won. The disparity in how they were treated was stark. Johnny's birthdays were celebrations, his room overflowing with shiny new toys, remote control cars, action figures, a gleaming bike with a bell. Tirzah's birthdays were practical affairs, her gifts limited to necessities: a pack of notebooks, a plain sweater, a pair of sturdy shoes. She accepted these quietly, her expectations shaped by years of making do. Sean and Jessica's attention, their warmth, poured into Johnny, leaving Tirzah to gather scraps of their affection when she could. As Johnny grew older, he began to notice the imbalance, though to him, It was a perk, not a problem. At 6, he'd strut past Tirzah with a new gadget, oblivious to her patched backpack. For Tirzah, this was simply the way things were. She'd grown so accustomed to being secondary that it felt normal, her role as the quiet, compliant daughter etched into her bones. Yet, despite the favoritism, she harboured no resentment toward Johnny. He was her little brother, and she felt a fierce, unspoken duty to protect him. She helped him with his math homework, tying his shoes when he fumbled, and read him stories when he couldn't sleep. Even when he was difficult, demanding, bratty, she saw the boy beneath, vulnerable in his own way, and loved him fiercely. Johnny, though, wasn't above exploiting the dynamic. He didn't fully grasp why his parents favoured him, but he knew they did, and he wielded it like a weapon. If Tirzah denied him something, he'd run to Sean or Jessica, his tears a guaranteed ticket to getting his way. "Tirzah's being mean," he'd cry, and their parents would side with him, their voices sharp as they reprimanded her. Tirzah absorbed it, her silence a shield, her love for Johnny unwavering even as it cost her. Years slipped by, and Tirzah, now a teenager, nurtured quiet dreams for her future, though they were vague, unformed. No one in the house spoke of college or careers, not for her at least. Jessica and Sean never asked what she wanted to be, never suggested she could aim higher than the life they'd mapped out. Tirzah, shaped by a childhood of accepting what came, didn't push back. She was content, or at least resigned, to let life unfold as it would. The idea of choosing a path, art, teaching, something bold, felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Money was tight, always. She saw it in the overdue bills stacked on the counter, the way Jessica's jaw tightened when groceries ran low. Tirzah learned to need little, to ask for less. But through all the hardships, the scarcity, the coldness, the weight of being less loved, she never imagined she'd lose the one thing she'd always clung to, the safety of home. The house, with its creaky floors and familiar shadows, was her refuge, the place she felt protected, even when love was scarce. The thought that her parents could one day cast her out, severing that fragile tether, was a possibility she'd never dared to entertain. The night grew late, the trailer's small living room bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. Tirzah and Amy sat close on the couch, their conversation tapering into a comfortable quiet. As the clock ticked toward early morning, Amy set her tea mug down and gave Tirzah a gentle smile. "I've got a bed ready for you, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm. "Fresh sheets, extra blanket. You need some rest after today." Tirzah's eyes softened, gratitude swelling in her chest. She stood and wrapped Amy in a tight hug, her cheek pressed against her grandmother's lavender-scented shawl. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, her voice thick. Amy hugged her back, her embrace steady, grounding, like a promise that tomorrow would be kinder. The next morning, Amy was up with the dawn, the clatter of pans and the sizzle of eggs filling the trailer. The scent of omelettes, studded with cheese and flecks of green onion, drifted through the air, coaxing Tirzah awake. She shuffled into the kitchen, her hair mussed, wearing an oversized t-shirt and the socks she'd slept in. Amy glanced up from the stove, her silver braid catching the morning light, and gestured to the small table. "Morning, sunshine. Breakfast's ready." They sat across from each other, plates piled with fluffy omelettes and buttered toast. For a while they ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the scrape of forks and the hum of a distant lawnmower outside. Amy's eyes, sharp and knowing, lingered on Tirzah, reading the unspoken thoughts behind her quiet demeanour. A small, encouraging smile curved Amy's lips, as if she could sense the questions and fears swirling in her granddaughter's mind. Setting her fork down, Amy leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. "Tirzah," she began, her voice steady but warm, "you're an adult now, a grown woman. Your life is yours to shape, and you can do whatever your heart sets out to do." She paused, her gaze softening. "And don't you ever feel uncomfortable staying here. This is your home for as long as you need it. You're always welcome with me." Tirzah lifted her eyes, meeting Amy's, and a warmth bloomed in her heart, spreading like sunlight after a long night. The words were a lifeline, a reminder that she wasn't adrift. Amy was her anchor, the one person in the vast, uncertain world who saw her, believed in her, and gave her the strength to imagine a future. A lump rose in her throat, but she managed a small nod, her lips curving into a grateful smile. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything she couldn't yet say. The day was winding down, the office humming with the soft clatter of keyboards and the rustle of papers being filed away. Late afternoon light slanted through the windows of Tirzah's corner office, casting long shadows across her desk. Monique from the legal department rapped lightly on the open door, her arms cradling a stack of documents. "Tirzah, the Gabovich and Partners contracts are ready," she said, adjusting her glasses with a quick smile. Tirzah glanced up from her laptop where she'd been scrolling through a web page of dresses, her brow furrowed in indecision. "Thanks, Monique. Just leave them on my desk, please. I'll review them in a minute." Monique nodded, setting the papers down neatly before slipping out. Tirzah trusted her legal team. They were meticulous, but she always made a point to skim the numbers and special conditions herself, ensuring every detail aligned with the initial agreements. It was a habit born of diligence, one that had served her well in her career. Her eyes drifted back to the laptop, the dress on the screen a soft ivory with delicate lace sleeves. She'd been researching for a week, torn between styles, unable to settle on the perfect one for an upcoming client event. With a sigh, she closed the tab, murmuring, "Maybe tomorrow," and turned her attention to the contract. She flipped through the pages, her pen hovering as she scanned the figures, her mind sharp despite the long day. Satisfied, she initialed the final page and glanced at her watch. Jeremy would be pulling up soon. Carefully, she rose from her chair, one hand resting on her rounded belly, the weight of her pregnancy slowing her movements. She smoothed her navy blouse, grabbed her purse, and made her way to the elevator. The foyer was quiet, the receptionist already gone for the day. Stepping outside, Tirzah scanned the parking lot and spotted Jeremy's sleek BMW easing into a spot. Her lips curved into a smile as she walked toward him, her steps deliberate but steady. Jeremy climbed out, his familiar grin lighting up his face as he rounded the car. They met halfway and he leaned down to kiss her, his hand brushing her cheek. "Hey you," he said, his voice warm. He opened the passenger door, but as she moved to get in, he shook his head, his expression shifting to playful exasperation. "Tirzah, come on," he said, gesturing to her belly. "You're still coming to the office?" Tirzah laughed, a guilty flush creeping up her cheeks. I know," she said, sliding into the seat. "You've been telling me to stop for weeks." Jeremy raised his eyebrows, spreading his hands as if to say, "I've been right all along." She chuckled, the sound bright in the evening air. "Okay, fine. Today I realized you might actually have a point. I'll stay home. Promise." Jeremy leaned against the doorframe, skeptical. "Uh-huh. I've heard that one before." "But," Tirzah added, her eyes twinkling, "if I stay home, Grandma's going to stuff me with her pies and cookies. I'll be bigger than this car by the time the baby comes." Jeremy laughed, closing the door and circling to the driver's side. He slid in, reached for her hand, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I love you," he said softly, his gaze holding hers. "Big or not." Tirzah squeezed his hand, her heart full as he started the engine and pulled onto the road. As they drove, Tirzah gazed out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and white. 13 years had passed since that shattering day when Jessica and Sean revealed she was adopted and told her to leave. The memory still carried a faint ache, but it was distant now, softened by time and the life she'd built. She'd faced hardships, lonely nights, dead-end jobs, the slow climb to stability. But she'd also found joy. 7 years ago, she'd met Jeremy, his quiet strength and easy humor a balm to her guarded heart. 2 years ago, they'd married in a small ceremony, Amy beaming in the front row. Now, with their first child on the way, Tirzah felt a gratitude that anchored her. Jeremy had taken to driving her to and from work ever since her pregnancy became visible, a protective habit she secretly cherished. The rides were a ritual, a moment to unwind and savor the life they shared. As the car hummed along, Tirzah rested her hand on her belly, feeling the faint flutter of movement. At the end of every day, she counted her blessings: Jeremy's love, Amy's unwavering support, the promise of their growing family. The road ahead felt bright, and for that, she was endlessly thankful. 5 years had passed since Tirzah founded Prime Nest, her own real estate company, a milestone that still felt like a dream. The journey to get there had been grueling, paved with long hours and steep learning curves, but Tirzah never wavered. She'd never felt weak, never considered giving up. Her resilience, forged in the fire of her past, carried her forward. After moving into Grandma Amy's trailer park 13 years ago, Tirzah wasted no time. College wasn't an option, her savings were too thin, and she refused to burden Amy. But she harbored no regrets. Instead, she threw herself into building a life, starting with a job at a diner just a few miles from the trailer park. Every morning, Tirzah drove her beat-up Honda Accord to the diner, the familiar hum of the engine a quiet comfort. She waited tables, poured coffee, and memorized orders with a smile, her tips piling up in a jar she kept under her bed. In the evenings, she returned to Amy's trailer, where the two would share countless sweet nights, talking over cups of tea or plates of Amy's famous cornbread. They laughed over old stories, cried over shared losses, and wove a bond that felt unbreakable. Amy, with her weathered hands and sharp wit, had a wealth of wisdom to share. One night, her eyes gleaming in the lamplight, she told Tirzah, "Every chance you get in this life is a gift from God. Whatever comes your way, take it, hold it close, and make it yours." Tirzah took the words to heart, treating every opportunity as a treasure, no matter how small. Back then, living in the trailer park, Tirzah's daily commute took her past an abandoned house on a quiet street. Its faded blue paint and sagging porch gave it a forlorn air, but its bones looked sturdy, promising. One day, she noticed a police car parked outside, 2 officers slapping abatement stickers on the door. Curiosity piqued, she pulled over and leaned out her window. "What's going on?" she asked. One officer glanced up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Owner's been neglecting this place for years. We've been issuing tickets for 2 years straight, code violations, you name it." Tirzah nodded, her eyes tracing the house's overgrown yard, where weeds choked the flower beds and bushes sprawled wild. To most, it was an eyesore, but to her, it was potential. She'd been telling Amy for months that one day they'd move into a bigger house together, a real home with space to breathe. That night, she tracked down the owner, an elderly man who sounded weary over the phone. He was eager to sell, naming a price far lower than she'd expected. Tirzah did the math, her diner tips, her small savings, a loan she'd scrimped to qualify for. It was just enough. With a leap of faith, she bought the house. The work began immediately. Room by room, Tirzah transformed the neglected property. After her diner shifts, while others went home to rest, she drove to the house, her trunk loaded with cleaning supplies and tools. She scrubbed grime from the walls, tore out rotted floorboards, and painted until her hands ached. On weekends, Amy joined her, wielding a paintbrush with surprising vigor, her laughter echoing through the empty rooms. Slowly, the house came to life. Fresh white walls, polished hardwood floors, a kitchen where sunlight poured in. When it was finally ready, Tirzah and Amy moved in, their few belongings dwarfed by the space but their hearts full. Amy stood in the living room that first day, her hands on her hips, her eyes shining with pride. "Look at you, girl," she said, pulling Tirzah into a hug. "You took a broken thing and made it beautiful. I'm so proud of you." Tirzah smiled, her chest swelling. A week after Tirzah and Amy settled into their newly renovated house, the neighborhood began to take notice. The once-forgotten property, with its fresh coat of paint, and neatly trimmed lawn stood out like a beacon on the quiet street. One crisp morning, Tirzah was sweeping the porch when she spotted a man walking his golden retriever past the house. He paused, his eyes widening as he took in the transformation. The dog tugged at its leash, but the man stood rooted, clearly struck by the change. Tirzah set her broom aside and stepped out, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Morning," she called, brushing her hands on her jeans. The man tipped his baseball cap, his expression one of genuine awe. "Morning. I gotta say, I hardly recognize this place. I haven't walked this way in a while, but I remember this house. Overgrown, falling apart. You've worked a miracle here." Tirzah's chest swelled with pride. "Thank you. It took some elbow grease, but we got there." "Understatement of the year," he chuckled, glancing at the pristine windows and blooming flower beds. Before he moved on, he hesitated, then turned back. "Mind if I ask, who did the work? The cleaning? The repairs? I could use a crew like that for my workshop. Got a contact number for the company?" Tirzah blinked, then grinned. "That'd be me," she said, a spark of opportunity flickering. "I did it all myself with some help from my grandma. I don't have a company, yet, but I can help you out. What do you need done?" The man's eyebrows shot up, impressed. "Well, I'll be. My workshop's a mess. Grease, dust, you name it. If you're up for it, I'd love to hire you." They exchanged numbers, and a few days later, Tirzah invested her last couple $100 in cleaning supplies, industrial-strength degreasers, mops, and heavy-duty gloves. She tackled the man's workshop, scrubbing until the concrete floors gleamed and the air smelled fresh. He was thrilled, passing her name to other local businesses. That job marked the start of Tirzah's cleaning business, a venture born from a chance encounter and her own grit. Within 3 months, she'd hired 2 women from the trailer park, both eager for work and quick to learn. They formed a tight-knit crew, tackling offices, warehouses, and storefronts with the same care Tirzah had poured into her house. By the end of the first year, her business had grown to 12 teams. Servicing contracts across the county was relentless, driving her Honda Accord from business to business, her pitch confident but genuine. "We'll make your space shine," she'd say, and her results backed it up. As she networked, she noticed a pattern: shuttered storefronts, abandoned lots, businesses that had folded. The sight of for sale signs sparked an idea. She was already connected with companies through her cleaning contracts. Why not expand into real estate? The leap felt daunting, but Amy's words echoed. Every chance is a gift. Tirzah studied the market in her spare time, poring over library books on property law and attending free seminars. She saved every penny, earned her real estate license, and started small brokering deals for commercial spaces. Progress was slow but steady. She negotiated her first sale, a vacant office building, after months of persistence, earning a modest commission that felt like a fortune. Each deal taught her something new: how to read clients, navigate contracts, spot potential in neglected properties. Years passed, and her reputation grew. As Prime Nest grew, Tirzah found herself consumed by the demands of real estate, her days filled with property tours, contract negotiations, and market research. The cleaning business, though thriving, needed a leader to keep it on track. That's when she Jeremy as the general manager. He was a whirlwind of energy, with a sharp mind and a knack for streamlining operations. His enthusiasm was infectious, and under his leadership, the cleaning company soared to new heights, securing contracts with larger firms, optimizing schedules, and boosting profits. What began as a professional partnership soon blossomed into something deeper. Late nights reviewing budgets turned into shared coffees, then dinners, their easy banter revealing a connection that felt like fate. Tirzah knew she'd found her soulmate. Trusting Jeremy's expertise, she stepped back from the cleaning business entirely, handing him the reins. He didn't disappoint. His strategic vision not only kept the company flourishing, but also freed Tirzah to pour her energy into real estate. Jeremy's support extended there too, He offered insights on market trends, helped refine her pitches, and celebrated every milestone. Together, they transformed Prime Nest into a respected name in the industry, a testament to their shared ambition and mutual trust. 2 years ago, before their wedding, Tirzah and Jeremy bought a new house, an airy 2-story home with a wraparound porch and a sprawling backyard. It was a symbol of their fresh start, a place to build their future. Grandma Amy, who had lived with Tirzah since the fixer-upper days, moved in with them. At 86, her steps were slower, her silver hair thinner, but her warm, sweet smile remained unchanged, lighting up the house. She was the heart of their home, her presence a constant reminder of love and resilience. When Tirzah and Jeremy arrived home that evening, the scent of Amy's baking, cinnamon rolls, still warm, greeted them. Tirzah kicked off her shoes and pulled out her phone, showing Jeremy the dress options she'd been mulling over. "I'm trying to pick one for Grandma's birthday," she said, scrolling through the images. "Something special for her." Jeremy leaned in, studying the screen, and pointed to an elegant, deep green dress with subtle embroidery. "That one," he said confidently. "It's perfect for Amy." Tirzah's eyes lit up. "That's the one I was leaning toward. It'll look so good on her." Amy's 87th birthday was approaching, and Tirzah had planned a surprise: tickets to a country music festival where Amy's favourite bands would perform. Amy had always waved off expensive gifts, insisting she didn't need things, but Tirzah wanted to honour her with something joyful, a memory they could share. The dress would be a small but meaningful touch. In the living room, Amy sat in her favourite armchair, a worn mystery novel open on her lap, her glasses perched low on her nose, her eyes straining but determined. Despite her fading eyesight, she clung to her rituals, reading, cooking, filling the house with warmth. The kitchen was her domain, where she whipped up hearty stews, flaky biscuits, and desserts that made the whole place feel like a hug. Tirzah watched her from the doorway, her heart tightening. The thought of losing Amy one day was a quiet ache, sharper now with the baby on the way. Tirzah rubbed her belly, a resolve settling in. She was taking time off work soon, stepping back from Prime Nest to focus on her pregnancy. More than that, she wanted those precious hours with Amy, cooking side by side, listening to her stories, soaking in her wisdom while she still could. Amy glanced up, catching Tirzah's gaze, and her smile softened, as if she knew. "Come sit, sweetheart," she said, patting the couch. Tirzah crossed the room, her heart full, ready to savour every moment in the cosy haven Amy had helped her build. The morning of Amy's 87th birthday dawned bright, sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows, where Tirzah and Jeremy had been up early, decorating with streamers and a homemade banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Grandma." The table was set with Amy's favourite breakfast, fluffy pancakes, fresh strawberries, and a pot of strong coffee. Tirzah, her belly prominent under a loose sweater, carefully arranged a wrapped gift box beside Amy's plate, the deep green dress folded inside with a satin ribbon. When Amy shuffled in, her eyes widened at the festive scene. "Oh, you two," she said, her voice thick with delight. Tirzah grinned and guided her to the table, pulling out her chair. "Sit, Grandma. We've got a special day planned." As they ate, laughter filled the room, Jeremy teasing Amy about her knack for sneaking extra sugar into her coffee. Then Tirzah slid the gift box toward her. "This is for you," she said, her smile warm but expectant. Amy's hands paused, her brow furrowing as she touched the ribbon. "For me?" she asked, her tone a mix of surprise and mock indignation. "Tirzah, do you know how old I am? I'm too ancient for fancy presents." Tirzah laughed, leaning forward. "You're 18, Grandma, young enough to wear this and steal the show." Amy's chuckle was bright, girlish, her eyes sparkling like they had decades ago. "Your trouble," she said, shaking her head as she untied the ribbon. She lifted the lid, parting the tissue paper to reveal the dress, its rich green fabric catching the light, the delicate embroidery shimmering. Her breath caught. "Oh, Tirzah." This is beautiful. She looked up, her voice softening. Thank you, sweetheart. Go try it on, Jeremy urged, his grin wide. We want the full reveal. Amy didn't need convincing. She hurried to her room, her steps quicker than usual, the box clutched close. Minutes later she emerged, the dress fitting her perfectly, its elegant cut accentuating her graceful frame. She smoothed the fabric with her hands, a shy smile playing on her lips. Well, she asked, giving a little twirl. Do I pass? Tirzah clapped, her eyes shining. You're stunning, Grandma. Happy birthday. Jeremy joined in, raising his coffee mug like a toast. To the best-dressed 18-year-old we know. Amy laughed, but her expression softened as Tirzah stood and took her hands. Grandma, Tirzah said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. I need to say something. Thank you. For everything. For taking me in, for believing in me, for giving me hope when I had none. You're the reason I'm here, the reason I've built this life. I love you so much. Amy's eyes glistened, a tear slipping down her cheek. She squeezed Tirzah's hands, her voice trembling. Oh, my girl, you've given me more than I could ever give you. Seeing you shine, it's the best gift of all. She pulled Tirzah into a hug, and Jeremy wrapped his arms around them both, the room brimming with love. The country music festival was a joyful blur, twanging guitars, lively crowds, and Amy's delighted clapping as her favourite bands took the stage. Tirzah and Jeremy flanked her, sharing smiles as Amy swayed to the music, the green dress catching glints of the evening lights. By the time they returned home, their hearts were full, ready for a cozy family dinner. They'd ordered Japanese food, sushi rolls, tempura, and miso soup, which arrived promptly. Tirzah set the dining table with care, arranging bamboo placemats and small ceramic bowls, the house glowing with warmth from candles and Amy's infectious cheer. They were just settling in, chopsticks clinking against plates, when the doorbell chimed, sharp and unexpected. Tirzah froze, her sushi roll halfway to her mouth. Jeremy raised an eyebrow, glancing at Amy, who shrugged, her fork pausing. You expecting anyone? He asked. Tirzah shook her head. No, nobody. The three exchanged curious looks, the mood shifting slightly. Jeremy wiped his hands on a napkin and stood. I'll check it out. He strode to the door and Tirzah heard a low murmur of voices. Then Jeremy's voice, laced with confusion, called out, Honey, come here. Tirzah's stomach tightened. She set her chopsticks down and walked to the foyer, Amy's curious gaze following her. When she reached the door, her breath caught. There stood Jessica, her adoptive mother, older and frailer than Tirzah remembered. Her hair, once neatly styled, was streaked with grey and pulled into a messy bun. She clutched a box of chocolates, the kind you'd grab last minute at a gas station, her eyes darting nervously. Tirzah, Jessica said, her voice thin but attempting warmth. I just wanted to say hi and wish Mom a happy birthday. Can I come in? Jeremy's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to Tirzah. He knew her story, the adoption, the betrayal, the day Jessica and Sean cast her out. Tirzah's heart thudded, a tangle of emotions rising, but she nodded slowly. Okay, she said, stepping aside. Come in. Jeremy led the way, his posture stiff as Jessica followed, her steps hesitant. She glanced around the house, taking in the polished hardwood floors, the framed photos, the cozy elegance Tirzah had built. Tirzah watched her mother's every move, her chest tightening with an unexpected ache. All these years she'd imagined this moment, facing Jessica, standing tall, proving they'd been wrong to discard her. She'd pictured herself sharp with pride, maybe even righteous anger, showing them how she'd thrived despite their rejection. But now, seeing Jessica's slumped shoulders, her faded sweater, the lines etched deep in her face, Tirzah felt only sorrow. Jessica didn't look well, worn down, diminished, like life had drained her spark. In the dining room, Jessica approached Amy, who sat at the table, her expression calm but guarded. Happy birthday, Mom, Jessica said, offering the chocolates with a tentative smile. Amy's smile was polite, her eyes soft but distant. "Thank you, Jessica. It's good to see you." She accepted the chocolates, setting them beside her plate. "Sit. Join us." The evening resumed, the air thick with unspoken history. Tirzah and Amy carried on with grace, passing dishes and keeping the conversation light. Stories from the festival, Amy's love for the fiddler's solo. Jessica picked at her food, her responses quiet, her eyes often drifting to Tirzah. Jeremy stayed close to Tirzah, his hand brushing hers under the table, a silent anchor. Then, abruptly, Jessica set her chopsticks down, her gaze locking onto Tirzah. "I'm so sorry," she blurted, her voice cracking. "I can't stay long. I've been carrying this guilt for years, Tirzah. What we did to you, it's been eating at me. I just needed to say it, but I can't sit here like everything's fine." The room stilled. Amy's fork paused, her eyes flicking to Tirzah. Jeremy's hand tightened on hers. Tirzah's throat tightened, the weight of Jessica's words colliding with the sorrow she'd felt earlier. Jessica stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Tirzah, can I have a minute?" she asked, her voice unsteady, eyes pleading. Without waiting for an answer, she moved toward the foyer, her steps quick, as if she couldn't bear to stay longer. Tirzah glanced at Amy and Jeremy, their faces a mix of concern and caution, then followed her mother to the door. In the dim light of the porch, Jessica turned, clutching the empty chocolate box like a lifeline. "I'm so sorry, Tirzah," she said again, her voice breaking. "For everything. I know I can't undo it, but I need you to know I regret it." Her eyes searched Tirzah's, desperate for something, forgiveness, acknowledgement, anything. Tirzah nodded, her throat tight, words eluding her. The anger she'd once imagined wasn't there, only a quiet ache for the years lost. She stood still, her hands clasped, waiting. Before stepping into the night, Jessica hesitated, then spoke softly. "Your brother Johnny, he's been asking about you. For years I was too ashamed to tell him the truth. I lied, said you left on your own, that we didn't know where you were." She swallowed hard, her gaze dropping. "But I've known about you for a while. I even worked for your cleaning company once, just for a few weeks. You wouldn't have known. I was just another employee." Tirzah's breath caught, the revelation landing like a stone. She'd built her business from nothing, never imagining Jessica had brushed against its edges. The thought was jarring, but she kept her face steady, processing in silence. "When Johnny found out you own Prime Nest," Jessica continued, "he came home furious, demanding answers." "He's changed, Tirzah. He's not the spoiled kid he was. He missed you, thought you were gone for good. He believed my lies, until now." Tirzah's heart stirred at the mention of Johnny, her little brother, now a man. She pictured his childhood smirk, his tantrums, but also the moments she'd held his hand, helped him with homework. "Tell him to drop by my office sometime," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'd like to see him." Jessica nodded, a flicker of relief in her eyes. "I will." With that, she turned and walked into the darkness, her silhouette fading down the driveway. Tirzah stood there a moment, the cool night air brushing her skin, then returned to the warmth of the dining room, where Amy and Jeremy waited, their love a steady anchor. A week later, Johnny appeared at Prime Nest's office, his knock tentative but sure. Tirzah looked up from her desk and froze. He was no longer the scrawny, demanding boy she remembered. Now, tall and broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard and kind eyes, he filled the doorway. A hesitant smile broke across his face. "Hey, Tirzah," he said, his voice deeper but unmistakably his. "Johnny," she said, standing, a grin spreading despite herself. They hugged, awkward at first, then tighter, years of absence melting in the embrace. He stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck. "I work at a woodworking shop outside town," he said, almost shyly. "Started as a hobby, now it's my job. I make furniture, cabinets, that kind of thing." They sat and talked, the conversation flowing easily, his life, her business, the small moments that had shaped them. After a pause, Johnny's expression grew serious. "I missed you, Tirzah. When you disappeared, I was too young to get it. But as I got older, I saw how Mom and Dad treated you. It wasn't right. I wish I'd done something." His voice cracked, his eyes earnest. "I love you, you know. Always did." Tirzah's chest warmed, pride and relief mingling. "I love you too, Johnny," she said, smiling. "I'm glad you're here." Reconnecting with Jessica felt impossible, the wounds too deep, but with Johnny there was hope, a bridge worth building. Months later, Tirzah returned home from the maternity hospital, cradling her newborn daughter, Lily. The house buzzed with joy, laughter spilling from every corner. Amy was there, her smile radiant as she cooed over the baby. Jeremy hovered close, his eyes soft with adoration. Friends and neighbours dropped by, bringing casseroles and balloons. Johnny arrived too, carrying a handmade wooden crib, its surface smooth and polished, with Lily engraved in delicate script along the side. "For my niece," he said, setting it up in the nursery, his grin wide. That evening, Tirzah sat on the porch, swaying gently in the rocking chair, Lily nestled against her chest. The sky was awash of stars, the air cool and sweet. Amy sat nearby, knitting a tiny blanket, while Jeremy and Johnny's voices drifted from inside, joking over dishes. Jessica and Sean weren't there, their absence a quiet note in the symphony of the day, but it didn't dim Tirzah's contentment. She looked down at her daughter, then out at the life she'd built, rooted in love, resilience, and the gifts she'd seized.